a cracker, whatever, freaker fracker.
Open up, Colorado. It's 420. Time to grind and burn.
This is not your son's stoner show.
Welcome back to the Cannabis Community Project, a weekly podcast high up in Denver, Colorado, exploring the business side of the newly emerging economy while living the lifestyle. Dairy Berry's recording studio, located in Arvada, Colorado, is your local recording studio with affordable rates. Mark is well experienced and will make your show, music, or any audio you have sound great. Take a look at Dairy Berry's recording studio or call Mark at 303-456-8216. Oh, Cannapreneurs, welcome to another beautiful Saturday afternoon with me, Brainstorm, up here at Dank Studios, 3835 Elm Street, Denver, hanging out here in what is becoming truly a cannabis community. Come up and say hi. I'm usually here on Friday afternoons. Come be on the show if you would like, or just come to the medical recreational store on premise here. We're working towards the multi-purpose room that's going to be located just across the alleyway. It's a very large facility that's under construction. Hopefully by 420 we will be ready to introduce this to you, the public, to have us come join in this community. Hey, speaking of joining the community, I just want to update you on the Cannabis Community Project membership page. We have some new memberships, some new incentives, some new gifts, crowdfunding, membership donations, purchases, products, retail. It's all part of what we do here because we're all trying to make a living at this. We're trying to make this be our job. We don't want to do part-time jobs of things we don't want to do. We want to do this for you. We want to bring the Cannabis Community Project to all of you Cannapreneurs so we can do the investigation and all you got to do is learn, right? We'll do the research. All you got to do is listen. So in exchange, we put together a list. Check it out at the website under membership. You can do small donations and get some free gifts like Cushley, our sponsor. We even have Hydrolock being given away, which is great for growers. It's a water conservation nanopolymer that absorbs 1,000 times its weight in water. We also have new grind and burn apparel. Have you seen the hat? Have you seen the shirts with the new logo, the new design? Thank you to Mr. Alex, our CCP designer, for putting that together over the last month. Check it out. It's pretty cool. I like the hat personally. Even though I'm not a hat wearer per se of this style of hats, I really, really love this one. And you might see me wearing it more and more out and about. And of course, the t-shirts. We got the herb box, the Mota pot. We got all sorts of deals put together. You'll get perpetual discounts on the stores. You'll get inside access to certain events and discounted access and passes. It's just a way that you can be an official part of the cannabis community while at the same time supporting the community financially with just a few dollars. And it literally is just a few dollars. Check it out, cannabiscommunityproject.com at the membership page. This week's show, we have David Law on. David was with us just a few weeks ago in studio, and he is back full of information. I just don't have enough time and enough shows. He should really have his own show. Well, this time he's talking about some very specific laws that are happening here in Colorado and on a federal level amongst the hemp industry and a little bit affecting the marijuana industry, quote-unquote marijuana. A lot of people don't know there's a small battle going on between medical growers and hemp growers. They don't want anything to do with each other. They don't want to be close to each other. They're battling for resources, just like the resources of our legislators. So it's very important to understand what's happening in hemp, but it's also going to affect how the medical side of growing and the industry happens. So David has 3 or 4 very specific bills over this last 6 months developing. Some of them have already passed, some of them are still coming, but this show is so packed full of information. You're just going to want to listen, even if you're not a hemp grower, right? If you're just a person who likes to learn stuff and who's curious about information and you're into what's happening in general in the industry, listen to David talk here. He's got it pretty much figured out on what's happening in the industry. That is why he is the premier hemp attorney, David Law. This is going to be a good one. All right. Hey, before we move on to this week's show, I just need to reach out very quickly and give a quick apology to last week's guest, Russell from Doobie.co. There was an error that I made that was kind of important. I kept calling this company Doobie.com. And I put in the title, I put in the description, I said it a few times in the intro, and then as soon as the show went live, I get a message saying, hey man, it's not Doobie.com, it's Doobie.co. And why is this important? It's not just a Google issue that there's only one similar domain out there. There's actually another person who actually owns the domain name Doobie.com, lives in Florida, is not at all the business that Doobie.co is doing. I made a little mistake, and it was 99% my fault. Why do I say 99? Because obviously the majority of 99% of everything that happens on this show is my responsibility. And ultimately, my fault for its failure or success, I guess. I should have checked before I wrote it in the title and the description and then mentioned it wrong a few times. I don't believe he's going to get any people lost out there. But there is a small percentage of fault out there to the universe, right? Sometimes shite happens. I'm going to say there is a fraction of a percentage of a fault to the International Domain Name Registry for allowing people to have a .com and a .co. How confusing is that, right? And then there's got to be an even smaller percentage of culpability. You know, when you're picking a domain name and you see that the .com is taken, maybe you might want to think about what is available in .com. It's a common mistake. I can't imagine I'm the first person to make it, or I'll be the last. Something to think about for everybody. Pick your names wisely. Now, your domain name and your company name do not have to be the same name you register with the state with. These are doing business as names. So think about it. How do search engines work? How are people going to find you? Is a letter of a .com versus a .co enough to throw people completely off your trail and have them lost in the ether from finding you? All things to consider when starting your business. But other than that small glitch, we had a great interview. The show went great. People really responded to it. Russell was a great guy. Very cool. A lot of information. I think this is one of those shows where not only can you learn a few things here and there about how to start a business via what Russell and Doobie.co did, but you can also work through some of those issues of what do you do when you're struggling? What do you do when you're not making it? And how do you keep going? How do you find that support from your community? So let's find out what exactly it was we talked about and what exactly it is that Doobie.co is all about. If you didn't hear the full show, go back last week's show, listen to the full thing. Let me give you a couple minutes right now on our short-term memory flashback relapse just to remember what we learned last week. Here we go. Grind and burn with Doobie.co.
So I'm Russell Thomas. I started Doobie. Doobie's an application and a social network for mobile devices within the cannabis industry. We're about 2 years strong now, but only about 1 year as an app on the market. And we started out in iOS, Apple that is. And Android was just released this past January 9th. So that's not that old either. But we're progressing rapidly, so much so that we're in the middle of replacing much of our back-end servers to just to be able to handle the load and grow. And I think a lot of people, especially around Denver, say, well, we haven't heard of you. We go, yeah, that's on purpose. We've been in the dark. We've been coding and testing and trying to perfect a product for what seems like forever at this point. And we didn't want to market it. We knew at some stages it couldn't handle the growth, and we've always been kind of running on a shoestring budget. So it's been tough, but our focus has been perfecting the product and getting to know our customer and really getting this thing down. And I can go into more details as to how it works and why that's more complicated than the average. That's Doobie. And yeah, people are loving it. And this is kind of our year to to really start growing. So we're almost there. But when you're trying to get a business going, you barely sleep. So in retrospect, what would be the best thing? Either having somebody like me that is more of a coder guy and having basically more people and having a coder, or hiring one just to serve that function.
So there's a lot of stuff that's going to develop over the next few years with blockchain and cryptocurrency and with checkout sites and with social media sites, and it's just all going to come together. This is a great idea, and I don't think you just stumbled across it. I think as you described, it was a building aspect. So my question is, building since when? How long have you been like this? How long have you been this type of person?
Yeah, always. I mean, I started my first business at 10 by going door to door with a self-propelled lawnmower and a skateboard. And I'd pull myself through the whole neighborhood asking people if they wanted their lawn mowed. I'm not so bombed out that I can't do my job well. Yeah. I can actually do my job better in many cases. Yeah. So I like that. Whereas then I can get some flour or do some dabs if it's Friday night late and I just need to be wasted, right? It's a totally different story. So now that's where I can think out of the box and come up with an answer nobody could ever to solve the problem in the most creative backdoor way imaginable, right? That's what made me also good in security. As a hacker, I could see both the other side and defend these things as well as create them and learn how to get around systems. And if you know how to get around software, you know how to patch it up.
Let's give one solid kind of wrap up that we can take away from this conversation.
I'll tell you what's tattooed on my arm, and that's no excuses, only solutions. But beyond that, I'd say the number one with this is you can do anything, but you can't do it alone. But if you really want to succeed, you need the right people. You need the right team. And if you as that individual are trying to succeed, it's up to you to maintain, manage, and lead that team regardless of who you hire. And you better hire people that are better than you.
How long have you been listening to the show? Long enough to know that it's your show, and all you got to do to be on it is just reach out to us at cannabiscommunityproject.com or email brainstorm at cannabiscommunityproject.com. Hey, Cannapreneurs, let me take a second just to tell you about Cushley Organic Products. Their company puts out products that are used in hospitals, healthcare facilities, clinics, and homes throughout the United States and beyond. So Cushley has invented this very unique product that works like none other. I use it myself, and many of my close friends and family use it. What it does is it eliminates odor. It doesn't mask it. It's not a perfume. It's not a cologne. It eliminates it. And it's organic and it's non-toxic. And Cushley is one of the best. www.cushley.com. Also find them on Facebook and other social media under the same name, Cushley Organic Products. So I have a theory. I'm going to run it by you. It's called the Krispy Kreme theory. Okay. It has to do with the rec places open. We had this big news of $5 million in 1 week or whatever the reports were, right? Millions of dollars in the first week, blah, 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 blah. So I have this Krispy Kreme theory. Were you here in Colorado when Krispy Kreme came back in 99-ish, something like that, 2000?
I wasn't.
Okay.
Then.
So I was here, and let me just describe very quickly what the situation was like. The situation was there was a store, and that store had a line going around the entire city for people lining up to get donuts. And when they came to town, people were talking about Krispy Kreme like it was going to be the next business to just destroy all other donut businesses. It was going to take over the world. 10-some years later, where do you find Krispy Kreme? In 7-Elevens in a cold box sitting on a shelf with all the other donuts.
I see where you're going with this. But.
Right. So the reason I call it the Krispy Kreme theory is because people are talking about these recreational centers making millions of dollars. If I can just be so simple as to say supply and demand. I think at the time when they opened, there was only 12 at that time. I mean, there may be 36 now, but I think there was only originally like 12 or something that had opened. Just like Krispy Kreme, when you put one store in a city and then build the marketing up around it, people will stand in line to get their donut for a period of time until the marketing monopoly dies down. And then you're left with two options: open more stores or go to 7-Eleven.
Right, that's amazing, right? And I think about it every day because all I did for years was risk management. So, my God, I always have a plan B for everything. I have a C and a D and maybe even down to a Z.
Wish I was a squirrel in the world, so I could be
assassinate me, we will congratulate. Next time assassinate me, we will congratulate.
We're not in Lakewood, though, are we? Where are we? We're in Wheat Ridge, I guess.
We're in Wheat Ridge, just west of Denver.
Yeah, I always, for some reason, I thought it was the Lakewood Animal Hospital, but it's not. It's the Lakeside Animal Hospital.
Yeah, we're actually very close to 3 different municipalities here. Wheat Ridge is the main one. Lakeside is just across 44th Avenue. That's where Lakeside Park is. Then there's Mountain View, which is just some businesses right along 44th Avenue and some houses.
So do you say Wheat Ridge or do you say Arvada? Or
No, we're in Wheat Ridge.
You're in Wheat Ridge,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. I guess that's so confusing because the building has Lakeside Animal Hospital written on it. That's the name of my wife's veterinary clinic that's downstairs.
But it's just a name. It's not in relation
that's just the name.
to...
We're called Lakeside. We're close to Lakeside. We're not in Lakeside. She just liked the name. Hey.
Well, we are back at David Law, Colorado, I guess is the website, here in Wheat Ridge, Colorado, upstairs from the animal hospital and the law offices of David Bush. Once again, following up with his in-depth knowledge and information about the hemp industry and most things cannabis related, correct?
That's right.
Last time we talked about some legal bills, and I think we're going to talk again about another one that has passed through where? Congress, Senate? What's this next one we're going to talk about?
Last time we talked a bit about a legal development in the state of Colorado. There was a bill that was passed that did a few things. Among the major ones, authorized the Department of Agriculture to develop a hemp seed certification program. So we spent a lot of time talking about that last time. What I thought we could talk a bit about this time is something about what's going on in Congress. There's a lot of proposals that are pending in Congress right now, and some of them are, I think, good. Some of them are a little questionable.
Okay. And these are hemp-related or medical marijuana related?
Well, good question. There are some that are directly related to hemp.
Okay.
There are a number of proposals that affect marijuana, but here's what people have to keep in mind is that right now the federal government looks at marijuana and hemp as exactly the same thing, that the definition of marijuana includes industrial hemp because the federal government, under its laws, doesn't make any distinction in the plants depending on the THC level. That's the difference we make in Colorado and a lot of other states do. The federal government does not. And so there are a number of proposals in Congress concerning marijuana, but because the definition of marijuana is so broad, they affect hemp. So I'm going to talk about both.
Their classification is a little less science-based and more like a 6-year-old that's just looking at something and saying, that looks like that. It must be the same.
That's right. Yeah, well, that unfortunately is the sorry history of cannabis, is that you take a plant that looks like cannabis and it's judged the evil weed no matter what's in it.
Judge a plant by its cover, I guess.
That's right. You can't tell. But yeah, that's the wonderful thing about cannabis is it's remarkably complex. There's hundreds and hundreds of cannabinoids.
Yes.
One happens to be THC delta 9, which is the stuff that gets you high.
I don't know what the statistical percentage on that is, but it's almost laughable, kind of in an absurd way to when you look at it, when you say it and then you think about it, it's almost laughable to even hear that. Like,
yeah.
Really? Our whole life is based around this type of equation that somebody's putting together? But
well, here's a fun fact. I love this.
I like fun facts.
Cannabinoids are not the only things that are present in cannabis. There's also something called terpenes. Terpenes is what actually gives the smells and the flavors.
Yeah.
So when you walk in a pot shop in Denver these days and you're hit by that aroma, you're smelling terpenes. You're not smelling THC. Okay? THC doesn't have an odor. Terpenes are not unique to cannabis. Let me tell you something else. Just a common plant out there that has terpenes in it.
Hold on, let's play a game. I'm gonna guess. Is it also a weed?
No.
Is it? So it's a flower. Does anybody else know?
I got an answer.
What do you think it is?
I got my hands up. I'm thinking hops.
Well, hops also comes from the cannabis family. Right?
Well, hops is related to cannabis. I actually don't know if hops has terpenes in it.
Yeah, I know they're part of the same family, but as far as smell goes, I can't think of a plant offhand or a flower or anything similar that has that distinct smell.
I'm not talking about a plant that has that distinct smell of marijuana.
Okay. Oh,
no.
you're just saying that has that in it, but not necessarily
Smells like it.
Terpenes is a whole class of organic compounds. It's a kind of organic compound. Just like cannabinoids, there's hundreds of cannabinoids. That's a whole class of organic compounds.
Okay.
Terpenes are not unique to cannabis. There are terpene compounds found in a lot of other plants.
Such
All right,
as?
ready for my example? This is just one plant that has terpenes.
It's going to be something simple, right? It's
Yeah,
be
it
like
is.
The Colorado Columbine or something.
Grapefruit.
Grapefruit.
Okay? How many times do you have grapefruit for breakfast, in your life? You've ingested terpenes, folks. Terpenes are also found in cannabis. Now, here's the fun fact, is under federal law, any extract of marijuana is considered marijuana. Any extract of marijuana is a controlled substance. You're eating some of that controlled substance every time you pick up a grapefruit. Think about that.
I'm not even sure how to respond to that.
Well,
at this
it just
point.
tells you how stupid the law is.
I'm going to have to pull that out at a party sometime.
Yeah.
And, get the crowd going with my facts. That's interesting.
Oh, yeah, just
What
look
else?
up terpenes on Wikipedia or any of these sites on the computer, and you'll find it's a very common organic compound.
Why is that not being brought to court? Why is there not Grapefruit Growers of America being sued in federal courts?
That's right. Yes, why aren't the mothers of America outraged by the prevalence of grapefruit in this country? It's corrupting our youth, right?
Big grapefruit.
That's the crazy thing about federal law. And some of the things that we're trying to change now is that they don't make any distinction in cannabis depending on the level of THC, even though that's what gets people high. And hemp doesn't have much THC, certainly not anywhere near enough to get anyone high. It's still considered marijuana. And any extract of marijuana is considered by federal law to be marijuana. That would include things that we find in grapefruit.
Wow.
Come on.
I've never heard that. It's going to take me a couple days to even wrap my head around that one. Wow, I knew I liked grapefruit for a reason.
Yeah.
This specific bill that we're talking about here does what? What's the...
Well, the first bill I was going to talk about, and this is the one that it's really been around the block the most. It's called the Industrial Hemp Farming Act.
Okay.
That is, it was introduced this year in Congress as House Bill 525 and Senate Bill 134. But let me give you a little background. This bill, I believe, was originally introduced by Congressman Ron Paul, not Rand Paul,
The older
but
one.
his father, the older one, yeah. He was
More
a big
sane one.
proponent of freeing up hemp from the Controlled Substances Act, going back years and years and years. And he was a lone voice in Congress. And you could actually go back, and it's still available online. You can see in 2007, 2008, before that, there were versions of the Industrial Hemp Farming Act that were introduced by Ron Paul. For years and years and years, no one ever paid attention to it, never went anywhere. And in the last few years, suddenly everyone's paying attention to it. Here's what's remarkable about the Industrial Hemp Farming Act is that for the first time, it was introduced in both houses of Congress right at the beginning of the congressional session. The 114th Congress just began in January 2015. If you know about these numbers we're talking about, there's a number for each 2-year session of Congress because that's the election cycle for the House of Representatives, and there can be new people in Congress after that 2 years. So for the next 2 years, we're going to have the same people in Congress, okay, and that's what's called the 114th Congress. This bill was introduced at the beginning of this session in both houses, and it has record numbers of sponsors. So that's all very encouraging. I think the last count I saw was there was something like 59 sponsors in the House of Representatives for the Industrial Hemp Farming Act, and I believe we may be approaching 10 senators now on the Senate side.
10% on both sides, getting more or less?
It's really getting up there, yeah. You know, we hear different opinions from people about how many co-sponsors we really have before this bill is going to be taken seriously. Because anything having to do with cannabis is so controversial and so against the grain of history, the sense seems to be that we're going to have a huge number of co-sponsors, maybe 100 in the House before this bill is going to go anywhere. But having 59 is nothing to sneeze at, and it's a whole lot more than Ron Paul being all by himself in Congress
Yeah.
not too many years ago introducing this bill and being ignored. Let me tell you what the Industrial Hemp Farming Act does. It's extremely simple. All it does is it takes the definition, which I was just referring to, for marijuana under federal law. And right now, the definition of marijuana makes no distinction based on THC content. And essentially, all the Industrial Hemp Farming Act it says is, here's the definition of marijuana. It does not apply to industrial hemp. And here's what we mean when we say industrial hemp. And it gives that definition we all know of 0.3% THC by dry weight or less. And so it's that simple. It simply defines out of the whole Controlled Substances Act a kind of cannabis, a variety of cannabis that doesn't have the stuff in it that gets people high. And what that could do is, if this were passed, is we'd suddenly be able to farm hemp anywhere in the country. We'd be able to export products, live plants, live seeds from one state to another. We could import good certified seed from other countries. Cultivars they've developed for generations, for hundreds of years, they'd be available commercially in the United States. It would make a huge difference. It would hugely decrease the cost of doing business in this area. We wouldn't have to import hundreds of millions of dollars of hemp products like we are now, which we do. I don't know if you're aware of that, to make hemp T-shirts, to make hemp oil. You can buy hemp oil now in most grocery stores, at least most stores like Sprouts and
At least
Whole
the seeds.
Foods. You know.
Yeah, I buy Costco a bag of hemp seeds.
There you go.
Hemp
You can buy hemp seeds. Yeah, all that stuff, that's imported. It's crazy. It's something we ought to be able to grow here. But we have to bring it across the border, at least from Canada, oftentimes from Europe. And it's funny, those products are entirely legal anywhere in the country. The Controlled Substances Act has a funny definition for marijuana, which allows certain things, like oil. Hemp seed oil is perfectly legal. You can buy it anywhere. You can ship it anywhere. If you have seeds that are not viable, that's okay. Stalks, mature stalks of plants, that's perfectly legal. The only problem is the plant you get them from is not legal. And so you have to grow the plant in another country, then chop up the plant and send the parts across the international border. Makes no sense. All that will go away if we pass this Industrial Farming Act. So that is what I would call bill number one.
It sounds so logical
Yeah.
and simple. Something's got to be wrong, right? Because, I mean, it's one of these no-brainer type things that who would go against it? But there's obviously an opposition, right?
There is an opposition. And, I should say, too, this is what's interesting in Congress. The larger group of legislators, generally speaking, the larger group of legislators supporting these bills are Democrats. But it's not overwhelmingly Democrat. There are a lot of Republicans. Sizable numbers of Republicans for any one of these bills we're going to talk about that are supporters. Some of the bills were introduced by Republicans.
Because of the farming.
Yeah, well, that's a lot of it because, for example, the state of Kentucky, it's a very red kind of state. Strong hold for Republicans. The Senate Majority Leader is from the state of Kentucky. But they are very supportive of hemp because their farmers really want it. Tobacco's a dying industry. Look, people aren't smoking so much anymore. When we say smoking tobacco, not smoking other things. And so, there's a lot of Republicans, especially in farming states, that tend to be very supportive. But on the other side, and here's the other side, there is a huge concern that a lot of traditional prohibitionists have, goes back to the fact that you look at hemp, you look at marijuana, they look the same, or could look the same. Depends on the cultivar again, but they could look the same. They are very afraid that if we allow this crack in the Iron Curtain, if people can start commercially producing hemp, that's going to be cover for illegal marijuana. And there's some good reason we can give why that makes no sense whatsoever.
Well, it's only illegal if you say it's illegal. Make it legal, and then it's no longer illegal. marijuana.
Well, exactly. There's certainly, and that's one very good reason there, is that all you have to do is legalize marijuana, and then, we don't have an issue. Then who cares whether you're growing hemp or marijuana, and there's no incentive to hide marijuana.
Right.
The whole
Right.
progress we made in Colorado, this is the exciting thing about our state, is we brought it out of the closet.
Yeah.
Okay, we don't have organized crime growing this stuff anymore like it's a drug and running it around the country like it's a drug and killing people. We have business people, tax-paying business people that are growing this stuff now that are going to make business decisions. And certainly one of those is not going to be, let's try to hide our marijuana behind a hemp plant.
Right.
So there's that. But without going into all the reasons why it's silly, I'm just saying that is the main source of opposition to the Industrial Hemp Farming Act. It's not that people are against hemp, but they're concerned about law enforcement. They're concerned about hemp being a cover for the thing they really don't like, which is marijuana. Mm-hmm. And so that's where we really need public education. We got to be able to make people understand there's countries all over the world. Okay, in China still has the death penalty, right? I mean, they're no nonsense law and order state. They have a huge hemp industry. Marijuana is totally illegal. You don't want to have marijuana and be caught with it in China. Believe me, you don't want to be caught with marijuana in China. But you can grow hemp, no problem. Well, they can do it. Why can't we? Come on, there's a way to do this. Lots of countries around the world are very successfully having a commercial hemp industry, even while they outlaw drugs that we consider still as drugs.
So do we just have to wait until some of these older congressmen and senators naturally pass on and leave their seat of power to somebody who has a better understanding of what's going on in the world?
Well, I don't know. Look, I'm no spring chicken myself. I don't know if this is really an age issue. I mean, Ron Paul, when he was in the House of Representatives and trying to put this bill out there every year, he was no young guy either. He was in his 60s and 70s and promoting industrial hemp. I mean, there is a generational aspect to it that I think, on average, if you take a younger population, they will tend to be more supportive of cannabis reform. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But there's an awful lot of older folks out there, and I'm one of them, that just think that the laws today are ridiculous and they need to change.
Right. And attaching it to a farming aspect, whether it's a farming bill or something, it's a good way to go because arguing against that, it's like arguing against, healthcare for vets or something.
Yeah.
You're just not going to be on the winning side arguing against something like that.
Well, and here's something cool about generations, again, now that you bring up farming, in Kentucky. Kentucky used to be the biggest hemp-producing state in the country. I mean, going back to the Revolutionary War, that was where our sails and our ropes came from for the U.S. Navy, was hemp, right up until World War II. So the last time hemp was legally grown, it was actually after hemp was declared illegal as marijuana in 1937, it still was grown legally during World War II, so into the 1940s. Today, again, there are people in Kentucky that are growing hemp. A few of those people are actually old farmers who last grew it legally back in the 1940s.
Wow.
And they're here today to see us come back to it. Yeah, it's kind of an emotional thing when people in Kentucky bring forward these farmers in their 80s and 90s and saying, yeah, they remember when. They had this on their land last, and they grew it as part of what they did to make a living, and they're trying to get back to it today.
Just like moonshining out there in the Appalachians, right? It's probably have people who were still living who were probably doing it illegally versus legally and the whole thing. Well, I mean, that lets you know how short of a time span we actually live in, right? I mean, we think about it like it's ancient history, but the reality is it's a generation away, not that far away at all. It's how fast things change.
That's the Industrial Hemp Farming Act, and that is the most straightforward legislation that is being proposed in Congress. There are some other bills, and I'm just going to briefly mention some of these, okay? Another one that's been getting a lot of press in Congress, and this is, again, a bill that has been introduced in both the House and the Senate. It's House Bill 1525 and Senate Bill 1333. They have almost the same name. The Senate bill is called the Therapeutic Hemp Medical Access Act, and the House bill is called the Charlotte's Web Medical Access Act. This is a bill that's really a little more specialized, and what it's attempting to do is to legalize the production of cannabidiol, we call CBD. What's kind of strange about this particular legislation is that it creates this fiction, which is something called a cannabidiol-rich plant. And the definition of it is industrial hemp. It's exactly the same as you see in the Industrial Hemp Farming Act. It's simply a cannabis plant that has no more than 0.3% dry weight THC. But under this particular legislative proposal, they call it a cannabidiol-rich plant, and then they say it's legal to extract CBD. You can make it and sell it. It won't be governed by the Controlled Substances Act anymore. But it has to be extracted from a cannabidiol-rich plant. In other words, from industrial hemp. Think about that. What it means is you can't grow marijuana for a CBD. But CBD occurs in marijuana. Why would we do that? Why would we say you have to have a particular concentration of one chemical in order to extract another chemical. It makes no biologic or economic sense. So that's my main objection, is that it creates an artificial distinction, which I don't think is necessary, and complicates things unnecessarily.
Where are these who writes these? Are these coming from think tanks, from lobbyists? Where are these being generated, these types of things that are passing through the Congress? Are they coming from individuals, from businesses? Who's behind these?
I can give you guesses. I don't know. Is simple as answer. I don't know who actually writes this. There are some lobbyists that are in Washington. The cannabis industry, and when I say the cannabis industry in that sense, it's the marijuana industry. They have lobbyists. I mean, there's the National Cannabis Industries Association. It's either them or a lobbying arm of them. I don't know which. But they have lobbyists in Washington that is promoting a lot of change. The Hemp Industries Association, which is one of the national trade organizations for hemp, they have a lobbying arm called Vote Hemp, and Vote Hemp has been behind a lot of this effort. So could be them. We know that there's loose reference that's often made to the CBD mommies. I don't think that's an organization per se, but it kind of characterizes a group of people that feel very passionately about CBD. So some of them may have a hand in writing some of this legislation.
I always feel like I get a better sense of what the motives are and how things are written if I knew who was writing it. If I knew it was coming from this entity, even if it doesn't make much sense, I could still understand kind of what their motive is or what their intention is, just knowing who they are that's writing it. Not knowing who's really writing these things makes it hard to figure out, like, why don't they make sense? Why are they so confusing? You don't really know who's writing it, so it's hard to connect the dots of...
Well, I'm sure you've heard that old adage about sausage making and legislation. The both things you don't want to really see happening. And this legislation is probably no different than anything else. There are certain interest groups that support it. I think there's a lot of medical marijuana and CBD interests that are really pushing hard for legislation that's going to benefit their industry. This therapeutic hemp does it. And one of the advantages that a lot of legislators see in the Therapeutic Hemp Medical Access Act is it has more support. How could he be against children? That's what they'll say. How could he be against all these epileptic kids running around that just want to be able to use cannabis for the CBD benefits in it? It's harder to say no. I think the opposition to something like the Therapeutic Hemp Medical Access Act is different. It's more muted than it is against the Industrial Hemp Farming Act, even though the Industrial Hemp Farming Act is so much simpler, so much cleaner, gives everybody what they want. This Therapeutic Hemp Act, it gives some people what they want, but it's more attractive to a lot of people. I think one good example is Orrin Hatch. He's a very conservative senator from Utah. He is supportive of the Therapeutic Hemp Medical Access Act. He's not a co-sponsor of the Industrial Hemp Farming Act. And he's a very intelligent man. I think it's all politics, is that he knows where the pressure is on him. It's the CBD mommies. It's the medical marijuana interests. They want this particular legislation, and that's what he's going to support.
Yeah.
A lot of people are in the same position.
So we need a way then to attach them all together. So there is no exit.
We need a way to be able to sell the Industrial Hemp Farming Act as the intelligent way to go.
Yeah.
It's the simplest law. It's the cleanest law. It gives everybody what they want. The only opposition to it that's really been expressed is this law enforcement paranoia, which is so unrealistic. We look around the world and we see what other countries are doing. They're not having that problem. Why would we have it in the United States? You can have a separate controlled marijuana industry and a separate agricultural hemp industry. It works. It does all over the world.
My thought on the law enforcement paranoia is a little more cynical, that their paranoia is not about what drugs may come in, it's what power they will lose by no longer having the ability to harass or use this as an excuse to stop somebody, frisk somebody, search somebody, to do something, to seize something. I think the paranoia is about, well, what are we going to use now to pull some car over and say it smelled like weed? If we can't use the smell of weed anymore, what are we going to do now? I think
tail lights.
But I think that's the paranoia. It's not so much that they're worried about what the streets are going to be flooded with. It's about what authority are they going to lose in this whole process.
Well, that's actually a very good segue into the next bill I wanted to talk about
Excellent.
because this one is about power.
Okay, let's name
All right.
it. What's the next
And,
one?
and this is fascinating. This is a little bill. There's actually another version of this same bill in another bill I'll talk about. But this one is only introduced in the House. It's H.R. 1940, and this is called the Respect State Marijuana Laws Act of 2015. And remember what I told you. Under current federal law, marijuana includes everything. So you could read this law as Respect State Marijuana and Hemp Laws
Right.
Act. But it literally reads Marijuana Laws Act. It would affect hemp equally. Here's what this law says is any cannabis activity that is legal in a state can't be interfered with by the feds. So that's simple. And it's quite striking what this actually accomplishes through those few words.
I'm one of these guys that went to basic civics class and learned about basic government. I'm listening to this going, well, why do we have to make a law saying that? I thought the way I learned it in high school civics class was unless the federal government has this authority, it's automatically a state
Precisely.
issue. Why are
Yeah.
we making laws to reaffirm? Isn't that redundant in what already exists in the legal system?
Complex area of the law, let me just state it very, very succinctly here. There's a principle called preemption. And preemption basically tells us that when you're regulating a given area of the law, the higher government authority controls. That's essentially what preemption says. So if we have, let's say, civil rights, that's a good one. Okay, there's state civil rights laws, there's federal civil rights laws.
Right.
Okay, federal law is supreme. You can't write a state law that contradicts federal civil rights law.
Right.
All right. And the reason that federal government legislates that is because there was a decision made long ago that this is an area that it can regulate. So Congress has the power to create laws governing civil rights. And because it has that power, other jurisdictions, states, localities, they could theoretically regulate it too, but they can't contradict federal law. They can't supersede federal law. So federal law takes precedence over any lower law.
But they had to write it into the Constitution to do that, right?
No, there's different sources of authority, and that's where it gets complicated. Constitution is certainly one. If there's a particular power of Congress that's authorized in the Constitution, I mean, literally in the express wording, something like issuing money, raising an army, okay, there's things like that that are literally spelled out in the Constitution, and that's one aspect, but there's also something called interstate commerce. The Constitution very, very generally says Congress shall have the power to regulate interstate commerce. A huge amount of federal regulation today, the authority for it is the Interstate Commerce Clause of the Constitution. So it's a very general grant of power. Believe it or not, that's how we got civil rights legislation. It wasn't the 14th Amendment that authorized Congress to pass the civil rights laws. It was interstate commerce. We said, well, motels are an interstate commerce business. People cross state lines and stay in motels. So Congress can say they have to be integrated. You know, that's public accommodations laws. But anyway, that could be a subject for a whole separate radio show that I didn't want to get into. But here's simply my point is the Controlled Substances Act, which is a federal law, which outlaws marijuana, which outlaws hemp, okay? Congress has the authority to regulate illegal drugs or make drugs illegal under the Interstate Commerce Clause. What that really means is Congress can regulate it. No state can pass a regulation that undoes it, okay? Simple principle. This statute, this bill, that I just read to you, Respect State Marijuana Laws Act, it turns preemption on upside down. And what this says is if a state is going to regulate marijuana, the federal government, notwithstanding the fact they've got the Controlled Substances Act, they can't come in and say, oh, no, you can't do that.
But this is a Colorado House bill.
This is a federal
Federal.
proposal. This is in Congress. What I'm saying is I think this is blatantly unconstitutional, this proposal. I don't think this would ever survive in a court of law. But this is actually on the books as a proposed act of legislation in Congress, the Respect State Marijuana Laws Act of 2015, which would turn legal principles in this country that we have lived by for hundreds of years completely upside down. And I think any court that looks at this is going to say, you can't do that. I don't see much future in the Respect State Marijuana Laws Act. Not that it isn't a well-intended idea, but legally it's horrible.
It's worth a try, though, right? Because
it's worth a try.
Shaking things up, even though it may not accomplish its goal, just the act of trying to shake it up might be enough to kind of lubricate the system, get things moving, even if this specifically doesn't reach its goal. Just trying might be enough to shake the system. And
Well, that horrifies me as a lawyer, okay? I understand. What you're saying is this is an important social change we'd like to promote.
more of a symbol.
There's a higher good here we want to pursue, okay? But as a lawyer, I'm trained to look at process, procedural fairness, making sure everyone has equal access to the law, making sure the laws apply equally to people, making sure the laws themselves are fair.
Yeah.
And so when people start giving that argument, the ends justifies the means, and that's really what you just said. I can't buy it. It's against everything that I've been educated and trained to believe in and do. So I'll tell you, on the air, I don't like this law. I don't like this at all. I like the idea behind it. This is not the way to do it. It's not to destroy the whole principle of federal-state preemption in this country. We wouldn't have civil rights in this country if that happened. Think about that.
Maybe this specifically needs to be questioned on whether this falls under that same premise. Maybe,
I think it clearly does.
Maybe marijuana is not the proper classification for that. I don't even think they should be using the word marijuana. Marijuana is a pretty racist term that was intentionally used from a Mexican slang word.
It's funny you say that. I do think that our drug laws are a kind of biological racism.
Yes,
And I've thought about that myself, and it's inflammatory to say that, but I honestly do believe that. And the hemp marijuana confusion is classic racism.
Yeah.
And so, well, God, they look alike. They must act and think alike. They must poison the body the same way.
Right.
It's pejorative even to say it's poison, right? It's a chemical that has certain effects on the human body, whether we're talking CBD or terpenes or THC delta 9. They're chemicals that may have some effect on the body. And some people take exception to some of those effects, right?
On that type of definition, food is almost a drug. It's a chemical we put in our body that affects the body. And
Sure.
Almost everything we put in our body, I guess, could fall under a drug category at some point.
Every morning I drink a couple of cups of coffee.
Right.
I haven't been arrested yet. I don't know why. But yes, every morning, let your listeners know I do consume a drug. It's called caffeine.
Which in some parts of the world is still creating like a drug war.
Yeah.
People being involved in violent activities because of coffee beans. There's land and everything else involved in these issues.
The other night I drank a glass of wine. I consumed ethyl alcohol. Wow. Desperately need a sensitive perspective on our whole drug policy, and when you lose perspective, that's when you have racism. And there is an aspect of that.
So if this isn't the proper procedure to go about it, from a legal standpoint, what would be a more appropriate way to go about turning it on its head without necessarily destroying the legal system?
I wouldn't turn anything on its head. What I do is I would say pass the Industrial Hemp Farming Act.
Just make it a federal...
Okay. Long term, we need to delist marijuana. It shouldn't even be in the Controlled Substances Act. Or if it is, it should be classified as a very low level, not a Schedule I, which is patently absurd. When you have cocaine and heroin as a less serious classification, they're Schedule II.
Yeah.
How can cocaine and heroin be Schedule II and marijuana be Schedule I? And that's a subject for a whole other segment on your show. But
White people
so long term, what we need to do is get rid of the insanity over cannabis in general. Short term, what we can do is at least liberate industrial hemp. And the Industrial Hemp Farming Act does that. It does it without causing any change, good or bad, in what federal law about marijuana is. That needs to change too, and that could be the next step. The problem with something like the Charlotte's Web, Medical Access Act, is it starts creating new categories that are very confusing. It starts twisting things around. It creates a monopoly for producers of CBD out of one kind of cannabis. It makes no sense. Biologically, economically, legally, it's a bad proposal and shouldn't be passed. So that's what I think we need to do, is free marijuana, free industrial hemp, do it right.
Next T-shirt, free marijuana. It's the next T-shirt we're making.
Change the Controlled Substances Act. There's a few other proposals out there I wanted to talk about, and these they'll require a lot less attention and time here. There are proposals to change our tax laws. As you know, there's a very unfair tax system right now for any kind of cannabis business. This affects industrial hemp, it affects marijuana, and that is Regulation 280E, which is the regulation that was created by the Internal Revenue Service really to crack down on organized crime, the Al Capones of the 1920s. And it was a way to make evildoers pay taxes without getting the benefits of business write-offs. Unfortunately, that is what's now governing the cannabis industry. We have legitimate people trying to develop mature industries and to pay taxes honestly, and they're getting shafted, totally shafted by current federal law. So there are several proposals that are pending in Congress right now to correct that inequity.
Shafted in the sense that they're unable as a business to take advantage of the tax system?
Of
like
business write-offs.
Okay.
And so the effective tax rates they pay is breathtaking. It could be somewhere, I've heard, in the order of 70, 80%. No other business in this country pays taxes like that, but cannabis businesses do. And they're legitimate businesses, at least as long as they obey state laws. They're legitimate. The feds may still consider them as vendors of controlled substances and criminals, but they're staying out of our business as long as we obey state law.
My friend,
that's a policy they adopted.
My friend who owns a medium-sized dispensary, maybe 8 to 10 people employed, they pay close to $1 million a year in overhead, and 80% of it is compliance. About $100,000 a month they pay in various types of overhead. And the majority says is just trying to stay on top of compliance and stay on top of everything that's required of them, from the type of door they have to have, the type of window, the type of paperwork, who's hired, where the I mean, the majority of expenses is compliance, and they're a mom and pop shop. 5 to 8 people spending $1 million a year just to keep up with what the state's requiring. So good luck for anybody smaller than that.
How are those compliance requirements funded?
Through the customers coming in and paying extremely high prices.
Why are they paying extremely high prices?
I would assume it's lack of competition and also just quality of product.
No, it's also very high taxes. Under state law, the regulatory systems for marijuana and industrial hemp, they have to be self-funding. They're self-funding through taxes and fees, okay? So there are tremendous taxes already, excise taxes and whatnot, sales taxes on marijuana in this state that go to pay for the compliance regulations for all these people employed by the state who oversee and enforce these compliance laws. So think about that then. These poor marijuana businesses, they're paying it coming and going. They have to pay high taxes, which they have to pass through to their customers, to pay for compliance, their own compliance.
Yeah.
And then the federal government comes in and says, but you know something? We're not recognizing that. You can't write that down.
Yeah.
You have to pay taxes on all that income you earned, even though that income was so you could pay your taxes to pay for the compliance. Now we're going to make you pay taxes on it anyway. That's why the tax burden for marijuana businesses is 70, 80%, which is astronomical. So there are a number of proposals in Congress. One of them is called the Small Business Tax Equity Act of 2015. It's kind of like the Industrial Hemp Farming Act in that it's a very simple statute that would be enacted. It's H.R. 1855 in the House. It's Senate Bill 987. All it does is say if you have a state legal marijuana business, and that would include industrial hemp, okay, Regulation 280E does not apply to you. In other words, you can write off your business expenses like any other business. You're not considered organized crime.
That's huge.
Yeah, it's huge. Absolutely huge. It's one sentence. It's a one-sentence statute. This thing is tremendous. This is one I would say, man, this deserves to be passed. I don't know if it will, and there are lobbyists running all over Washington right now trying to promote this thing. It's got a number of co-sponsors. It's getting a lot of attention.
Why can't all laws be written in what's why can't that be some type of requirement?
That should be a law.
Right? No more than a paragraph or something?
Yeah. There's something called the Marijuana Tax Revenue Act of 2015. This was only introduced in the House, not in the Senate. It's H.R. 1014. Interesting what this does, it's actually quite a long statute. It creates a whole tax regime, excise taxes for marijuana, which isn't even the interesting part of the statute, our bill. What it proposes is to exempt some marijuana from Regulation 280E. Just some, not all of it. And that would be medical marijuana. And actually, it goes farther than that. What this proposes is medical marijuana would be subject to tax at all. So that's interesting. With this particular proposal,
At the same time, applying for a medical marijuana card is becoming more difficult. I wonder if there's any correlation there. Because, when I first got my card some years ago, it was a doctor's visit. It was close to $100 to the state, close to $100 to the doctor.
Yeah.
When I renewed at the beginning of the year, I paid $35 to the state, $35 to my doctor, but the appointment of the doctor was about 3 times as long and far more rigorous and documented.
Really?
And more of a detailed kind of long-term plan. And a lot of that was the doctor telling me that we're under new pressure and regulation to actually show a full documentation of your yearly checkups here, of your progression, to actually write reports of recommendations that are specific rather than these general type reports. And I wonder if there's something going on there where it's becoming more difficult for people to be classified as patients, but those who do get classified will then get more benefits, like less taxes. And
boy, that's a very good question. And bring that up in your next interview of a good marijuana attorney.
Because there's less and less medical facilities, more places are going to recreational, and there's fewer and fewer medical dispensaries that are existing. A lot of them are doing both, and then some are just switching completely over to recreational.
Well, I imagine the profit margin on medical is way lower and probably going down, especially
Even
with the cost of regulation going up.
Tax on it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still very profitable. So
This Marijuana Tax Revenue Act, this is one where I think it's a little troubling because it creates all these kind of categories. You'd still be taxed heavily if you were a recreational marijuana business person. If you were an industrial hemp farm, if you were growing fiber to weave T-shirts, okay, you'd still be subject to all the onerous tax laws. The only one who gets out of it is medical marijuana, although it doesn't define what medical marijuana is. So this law also would create some interesting quandaries and interpretation.
Well, I mean, that's, I guess, why people pay the lawyers, right? It's to figure out what all this stuff means and interpret it.
Here's the last substantive law I just wanted to discuss briefly. And this is, it's kind of the potpourri. It combines a lot of the stuff we just talked about. And this is, again, a bill that's been introduced in both the House and the Senate. It's called the Compassionate Access, Research Expansion, and Respect States Act of 2015. Long title. And this is H.R. 1538 in the House, and in the Senate Bill 683. So I'll just run down a few bullet points of what this one does, which is going to start sounding very familiar to you. Number one, it does something like the Respect States Marijuana State Laws Act. It would exclude from application of the Controlled Substances Act against any person acting in compliance with state law if they're dealing with medical marijuana or if they're dealing with cannabidiol, CBD. So it gives a special exception to those two categories of medical users or medical producers. Here's what's really odd. Then what it does is it reclassifies all other marijuana. So that would again include people growing fiber industrial hemp to make T-shirts, okay? It would reclassify that kind of cannabis from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2. So it would put it on the same level as cocaine and heroin. Think about that. The guy who's growing industrial hemp to make T-shirts would be still considered under federal law growing something as bad as heroin. But that's what this proposal would have. It also provides some banking reforms. It eliminate the problems with access to banking that cannabis industries have. It authorizes limited research on marijuana. And as a final thing, this is kind of an interesting twist. Apparently there's been a lot of problem with the Veterans Administration that employees in the Veterans Administration, healthcare professionals, want to be able to recommend, in appropriate circumstances, medical marijuana or CBD to their patients, and they're barred by federal law from doing that. This would provide an exemption for healthcare professionals in the Department of Veteran Affairs to do what they think is professionally appropriate. So this is really kind of a potpourri of a lot of interesting things thrown together in one bill.
I don't see any reason why a legislator should ever be in front of a doctor telling a doctor what they should or shouldn't be recommending to the patient.
Sure. And we hear that debate all the time is in the abortion arena, don't we?
Right.
And it creates a lot of passion, doesn't it? There are people who say the government should not get between the doctor and patient. That's a great principle unless you're opposed to abortion. It's a great principle here, too, unless you're concerned about these horrible drugs getting into the hands of kids and organized crime. I mean, that's what we're up against. I'm not advocating for that position. I'm just saying that is the nature of the debate we're having.
It's probably the same person on both of those arguments.
Could
also.
be. Yeah. I mean, that's a great idea. Don't let the government get between the doctor and patient. My health, my body, that's my business. Stay away.
Yeah.
Okay? Until we start stepping on these other values that people feel passionately about.
Well, I mean, Rand Paul's a gynecologist, right? And isn't Rand Paul a women's doctor? So I'm sure he's on both sides of those debates also.
Yeah. Then he had Dr. Kevorkian. Remember Dr. Death?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, wanted to have assisted suicide. He was a big advocate for that, and that drove people crazy. He lost his medical license.
Oh, yeah. I saw the documentary, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, should the state not interfere in that? Should people be able to commit suicide with the assistance of their doctors? Some people would say, the right circumstances, It's tough. These are not easy issues.
You're right. I mean, there's so much here, and each one is weeks and weeks of debate and conversation. How many of these laws are coming up this year? I mean, you got a whole binder full of them.
Oh, well, this whole binder I have in front of me, this is from a longer talk I gave, and I'm just looking at a few pages.
But is this all recent stuff that's either recently passed or getting ready to be presented?
The proposals I talked about, all of them are really just dormant.
Okay.
And I told you that the one that is getting closest to the threshold of being able to move forward is the Industrial Hemp Farming Act. Just from informally what I heard from people that they would like to see 100 sponsors on the House side, and I think that we're up to 59. So, I mean, it's not exactly getting within spitting distance, but it's up there. It's nothing laughable anymore when you have 59 co-sponsors. What has to happen next for any of these bills to advance is they've got to have hearings in committee. They've all been assigned to one or more committees, and it's different. The Judiciary Committee is heavily involved. The Commerce Committee has some of these. Ways and Means, I think, has some of these bills. They're before a bunch of committees and subcommittees. Somebody has to break the ice and hold a hearing, a public hearing, where they're going to bring in people to testify for or against the bill, or for or against parts of the bill. And to date, there has been no political will to do that. The people in Congress that are running these committees just don't feel the pressure and don't have the interest right now in scheduling any of these for hearings.
Would you testify in front of Congress if asked?
Oh, God, I would jump at the chance, especially for the Industrial Hemp Farming Act. That's where I feel passionately.
Yeah.
Yes, and that one on Regulation 280E, although I'm not really qualified, I'm not a tax attorney, I would support that with both hands. Some of these other proposals, I think there's too many warts on them. I don't like them. I wouldn't support them. But anyway, generally the process is a bill has to get through committee. It has to be marked up, has to be to a point where the committee can vote on it and approve it, gets reported to the floor of the House or the Senate, where then it may or may not get scheduled for a vote. So there's all kinds of people that have their hands on these bills and control them. If it's voted on and passed in a House, it still has to be voted on and passed in the other House. And if those bills are different, then those differences have to be reconciled in a conference committee. Both houses have to vote on the reconciled bill, and only then can it go to the president for signature. So there's a lot of steps that it has to go through. Step one, like I said, is hearings. There has never, ever been a hearing on any of these cannabis reform bills, going back to Ron Paul's efforts 10 years plus ago, introducing the Industrial Hemp Farming Act. Never was a hearing, still hasn't been one. If you want to write to your congressman, that's what you should write about is, darn it, let's at least be heard on this. You may not like this bill, let's have a hearing.
That's what we can do as individuals.
That's what we can do, is absolutely. We
to our
need,
congressman.
We need to support the process here and get these bills heard.
And the time frame you're talking about sounds like this is not going to be an Obama issue. This is going to be whoever's next.
Very much so. Very much so. I think that the future of the cannabis industry kind of hangs in balance because we don't know if we're going to get, well, we're probably going to get a Republican president. I mean, that's what chances are. I would place my bets on that. I'm not saying who I would vote for, but it seems that's the trend these days is moving towards the Republican side. The question is, are we going to have a reform Republican or a reactionary Republican? Are we going to have one that wants to see cannabis laws made a little more rational and free up industrial hemp, free up medical marijuana, free up recreational marijuana? Or are we going to have someone who's on the other side? And there's Democrats on that side, too, okay? I wouldn't put this all on Republicans. I'm just saying we're likely to have a Republican administration next. So then the question is, who among the candidates could possibly support this?
So then this next political cycle is going to be big for a lot of what's happening right now, even though we're not thinking about it. That's a lot of stuff you're throwing at us. I'm sure people will have to go out and Google it and go to the state website and any other websites and really read through these to get a better understanding of what we've talked about. I'm sure you could go into much more detail about all of these.
I'll tell you an excellent website anyone can get on.
Okay.
If you ever want to look at bills that are pending in Congress, go to the Government Printing Office website. It's www.gpo.gov. That's it.
GPO.gov.
Yeah, gpo.gov. That's an excellent website. You can get a copy of any bill, and it also will give you the progress of that bill. It'll tell you what the status is, whether it has been passed in the House or passed in the Senate, and that has a lot more information on the procedure. So you can look up a given bill, and it will tell you what committees it's been assigned to, what members of Congress have co-sponsored it. There's just a lot of data, like whether it has had hearings, whether it's been marked up at all. You can look at different versions of the bill and so forth.
Excellent. Well, speaking of websites, let's give out your website, because maybe there's a lobbying firm that wants to take you to Washington and have you sit in front of, maybe they want to hire you to sit in front of Congress. Give your side of the story. Let's give out your information.
All right. So, yes, another excellent source of information is me. My name is David Bush. My law firm is David Law, DAVIDLAW, and my website is www.davidlawcolorado.com. My email address is bush, B-U-S-H, @davidlawcolorado.com, and my phone number is 303-422-0064.
Very good. Well, as always, I appreciate your time. We spent quite a bit of time up here, so hopefully it didn't take away from any major cases you're working on. But as always, I appreciate it, and we'll have to check in again when something happens, either with these or something else happens in the next couple months. We'll do another little update. Maybe this summer something big will happen in the industry that we can report on.
Well, what we should do is talk maybe when we get a little closer to harvest time.
Okay.
And I have some clients that are growers.
Okay.
And they'll be able to tell me how the harvest was and what prices are looking like. You can see if my prediction bears out that the price of seed is going to drop precipitously. I think it ought to this fall. So let's see if that really happens.
Maybe that's something I can incorporate into the website, like make your prediction here.
Yeah.
And see who's closest to pricing and everything else. A little fun game on the website. Very good. David, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure.
We'll speak to you again.
Okay, let's do that.
There you go, Cannapreneurs. That's all I have for you this week. Thank you very much for joining us. Make sure to come back next week. And after the show, you can always carry on the conversation with us on all the social media, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Google, Mass Roots, and so much more. Even YouTube. Stay involved, because this is your community. So next week, we're going to have more conversations that you want to hear, more guests that are going to help us take it to the next level. This is your show, so come back. We'll see you next week.